Welcome back to Chatterbox Podcast. Today we're starting a special 3-part series all about apartment rental. First up, looking for an apartment. So John, let's imagine you're walking into a rental office. What's the first thing you hear?
Right. So the landlord might say something like, "We have a few units available for rent." And you'd be like, "Okay, cool. Show me what you've got."
Yeah, exactly. That's when the excitement kicks in. But before you get too carried away, you gotta ask the big question. What's the rent on this place? Or how much is the monthly rent? I mean, you need to know if you can actually afford it, right?
Exactly. And you don't want to waste anyone's time, especially your own. But don't forget to ask if utilities are included. You'll want to know if that monthly rent covers things like electricity, water, gas, internet, basically anything extra you might be paying on top of the rent. It can really add up.
Oh, for sure. Utilities can be a sneaky extra cost. So you might ask, is that all inclusive? That means, does the rent cover everything or do I need to pay for these things separately?
Yep, and once you get the price sorted out, it's time to take a closer look at the place. But first, this is super important. You want to ask about the neighborhood, like, what's the area like? Or, is this a good neighborhood to live in? That's your chance to get the lowdown on where you'll be spending all your time.
Right? You don't want to end up somewhere that's sketchy or too far from work. You could ask, is this area safe? Or even, is there parking available around here? Especially if you've got a car, you want to know if it's a pain to find a spot.
True. And if you're into the whole vibe of a place, you might ask, what's the neighborhood like? Is it more quiet or is it lively and full of activity? You'll want to know if it matches your style. Maybe you want a chill place, or maybe you're looking for something close to nightlife.
Oh, yeah. If you're the type that likes to go out, that's a super important question. But if you like peace and quiet, maybe you want to avoid areas that are all about the nightlife. It's all about what fits your lifestyle. And you gotta ask, are there any amenities nearby? Like grocery stores, gyms, or coffee shops?
Exactly. You know, one time I rented a place that looked perfect until I realized there was no coffee shop within walking distance. I'm telling you, I was lost without my morning coffee runs.
Ha, I feel you on that one. A coffee shop can make or break a neighborhood for sure. So once you've got a feel for the area, let's say you're thinking about moving forward. You could ask, can I take a look at the lease terms? This way, you'll get a sneak peek at the fine print before making any big decisions.
Absolutely. And when you ask to see the lease, make sure you actually read it carefully. There could be clauses in there that you don't even think about, like if there's a pet policy or a late fee for paying rent late.
Right. You don't want to be blindsided by stuff like that. Oh, and while we're on it, sometimes landlords might say something like, the lease is for 1 year with the option to renew.
Ah, yes. Option to renew. That means you can stay for longer if you like it. But if you don't, you're not stuck in a long-term commitment. So always ask for the renewal options to make sure you're not locked into something you don't want.
Exactly. And if you're new to the city or country, this is where you ask, are there any transportation options nearby? You might not have a car, so it's crucial to know if there are buses or subway stations close by.
Good point. You definitely want to know how easy it is to get around. Oh, and this one is important. Is the apartment pet-friendly? You've got a cat or dog. You'll want to make sure they're allowed before you fall in love with the place.
For sure. I mean, imagine finding the perfect place only to find out your furry friend isn't welcome. That would be a deal breaker for me. And if the landlord says, we allow pets, but there's a pet deposit, that's another thing to consider. A pet deposit is like an extra security deposit, just in case your pet causes any damage.
Yeah, that's something you'll need to factor into your budget. It's not cheap. So here's the thing. When you walk in, be ready to ask a lot of questions. And don't be afraid to dig deep.
Exactly. And don't just focus on the rent. It's all the little things that can make a big difference in the long run. So let's say you're feeling good about the place, but you're not totally sold yet. You could ask, can I take a second look at the apartment before I make my decision?
Oh, absolutely. A second look is always a great idea. Gives you a chance to really check out the details, like the windows, the floor plan, even how much natural light the place gets.
Yes, light is key. You don't want a dark, gloomy apartment. And if you're not feeling it, it's totally okay to say, I think I need to keep looking. There are plenty of options out there.
No shame in walking away if it's not right. Better to keep looking than to settle for something you're not happy with.
Exactly. All right, so in this first part of the apartment rental process, we've covered a lot. You've asked about rent, utilities, the neighborhood, lease terms, and even pets. And don't forget, ask for that second look if you need it.
Right. Just remember, the more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make the right choice. So let's wrap it up with a quick review of today's key phrases.
All right, folks, here we go. Repeat after us. What's the rent on this place? Are utilities included? What's the neighborhood like? Is this area safe? Can I take a look at the lease terms? Is the apartment pet-friendly? Can I take a second look at the apartment before I make my decision?
You got it. Keep practicing these phrases, and soon you'll feel like a pro when you're looking for an apartment.
And be sure to tune in next time for part 2 of this series, where we'll dive into the lease signing process and all those important details you don't want to miss. Part 2, the lease signing process. All right, so now that you've found an apartment you like, it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty, signing the lease. John, when the landlord says, "Do you want to sign a lease?" what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, before you dive in, you should definitely ask to take a look at the lease first. You might say, "Can I take a look at the lease first?" Or, "What's the lease duration?" You want to know how long you're committing to the place. Usually it's a year, but you want to make sure.
Yes, exactly. The lease is basically the contract between you and the landlord. You don't want to sign anything without knowing exactly what you're agreeing to. And if you're ready to sign, you could say, "Yes, I'm ready to sign the lease." But if you're not quite there yet, you can always say, "I need to think it over. I'll get back to you." Never rush into these things.
Absolutely. It's a big commitment, so take your time. And don't forget about the security deposit. This is something you'll definitely hear about. The landlord might casually mention, "There's a security deposit required."
Oh, the famous security deposit. Usually, it's 1 or 2 months' rent. It's there to cover potential damage or if you don't pay the rent, but you want to ask, is the deposit refundable? If you don't cause any problems, you should get it back when you move out.
Exactly. And just like that, you're almost there. But don't forget to double-check the move-in date. You can ask, "When is the apartment available?" Or, "What's the move-in date?" It's important to know if it works with your schedule.
For sure. Timing is key. You don't want to find yourself stuck with no place to go. And hey, if you need a little flexibility, you could ask, "Could I move in earlier if needed?" Sometimes landlords might be open to adjusting that.
And once all the details are squared away, you'll want to confirm everything one last time before signing. You can say, "So, to confirm, the rent is $1,200 a month, and utilities are included, right?"
Yes, yes. Always make sure to confirm the rent amount and what's included, whether it's utilities, internet, or anything else. You don't want any surprises later on.
Right. And another thing to ask about is maintenance. If something breaks in the apartment, who's responsible for fixing it? You can ask, "Who handles maintenance? What happens if something breaks in the apartment?" Just to make sure you're covered.
That's a big one. You never want to be stuck with a leaky faucet or a broken fridge and no one to call. So definitely confirm who's in charge of that.
Once everything checks out and you're comfortable with the terms, you're ready to sign. You can say, "I'm ready to sign the lease," or even, "Let's do this," to make it official.
Exactly. You've now officially got yourself a new home. But before you do that, take your time to read everything carefully. The more you know, the more confident you'll feel going into the next step.
And remember, don't hesitate to ask for clarification if you're unsure about anything. You want to be 100% clear before you sign anything.
Totally. So let's go over the key phrases one more time to make sure everyone's got them down.
All right, here we go. Repeat after us. Can I take a look at the lease first? What's the lease duration? I need to think it over. I'll get back to you. Is the deposit refundable? When is the apartment available? Could I move in earlier if needed? So, to confirm, the rent is $200 a month, and utilities are included, right? Who handles maintenance? What happens if something breaks in the apartment? I'm ready to sign the lease.
Awesome job, everyone. Keep practicing these phrases, and you'll feel totally confident when it's time to sign that lease. Part 3, the moving process. All right, folks, you've signed the lease, and now it's time for the fun part, moving in. Things are about to get real, but before you start packing, you need to ask a few important questions to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Oh, for sure. The first question you'll probably want to ask is, are there any move-in fees? Some landlords charge extra fees for things like elevator use or even an initial cleaning fee, especially if you're moving into a high-rise building or a fancy complex.
That's a great point, John. You don't want to be surprised with additional costs when you show up on moving day. Another important question is, when can I pick up the keys? Or, what time can I move in? You want to know exactly when you can get access to the apartment so you're not waiting around.
Exactly. No one wants to wait to get inside their new home. And once you know when you can get the keys, it's time to start thinking about the actual move itself. You might want to ask, do you allow movers? Or, are there any restrictions on move-in times? Some places might have strict rules about when and how you can move in, so it's important to check.
Right. Some buildings might only allow move-ins during certain hours, or they might require you to reserve an elevator in advance. And don't forget, speaking of moving in, you might also need to ask about parking. Is parking included? Or is there a parking spot available? This is a big one, especially if you're in a busy city or a building with limited spaces.
Definitely. Parking can be a real headache if it's not sorted out ahead of time. Now, once you've got your stuff inside, it's time to start settling in. One of the first things you'll want to know is where you can throw out the trash. You could ask, where do I throw out the trash? Or, what's the policy for recycling? Knowing where to dispose of your waste is a small thing, but it can make your life way easier.
For sure. Every building has its own rules about trash, so it's good to get that info early. And once you're unpacked and settled, you might think, I'm really happy with the apartment. Or, I think this is going to be a great place to live. Those are the moments you've been waiting for, right?
Exactly. Once everything is in place, you can take a deep breath and relax. You've made it. But don't forget, there might still be a few last-minute things to sort out, like setting up utilities or changing your address.
Right. And if you're ever unsure about something after you've moved in, don't be afraid to reach out to your landlord or property manager. Whether it's about maintenance or other questions, you want to make sure you've got everything covered.
Exactly. And you know what? The move-in process doesn't have to be stressful if you're well prepared. So let's quickly recap the key things to ask when moving in.
Here we go. Make sure to remember these phrases for your next big move. Are there any move-in fees? When can I pick up the keys? What time can I move in? Do you allow movers? Are there any restrictions on move-in times? Is parking included? Where do I throw out the trash? What's the policy for recycling? I'm really happy with the apartment. I think this is going to be a great place to live.
Awesome job, everyone. With these phrases, you'll be ready for your next apartment move. Remember, take your time, ask the right questions, and soon you'll be settling in like a pro.
Absolutely. So, to wrap it up, we've covered the 3 main stages of apartment rental: looking for an apartment, signing the lease, and moving in. You're now officially ready to tackle each stage with confidence.
And now you know exactly what to do when it's time to move in and get settled. Good luck, everyone, and we hope you find your perfect home soon.
And that's a wrap for today's episode on apartment rental, folks. We've covered everything from apartment hunting, signing the lease, and even moving in. Hopefully, you're feeling a lot more prepared for your next big move.
Definitely. Moving can be stressful, but with the right questions and phrases in your back pocket, you'll be a pro in no time. Plus, the more you practice these phrases, the more confident you'll feel when you're out there apartment hunting.
Exactly. And if you're still looking for more tips or need a refresher on today's episode, don't forget to check out our show notes and follow us on social media. We love hearing your feedback.
Yes, absolutely. Drop us a message with any questions or topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. We're always happy to help.
And remember, whether you're moving into a brand new place or just dreaming of your future home, keep these phrases in mind, and you'll make the process way smoother.
We'll catch you next time with more useful tips, fun phrases, and all things English learning. Until then, happy apartment hunting, and good luck with your move.
Wait, John, I have another option. Let's dive in.
Sure, Jessica.
Welcome back, everyone, to Chatterbox Podcast. All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling one of life's trickiest challenges:
Apartment hunting. I mean, is there anything more stressful than trying to find the perfect place without losing your mind?
Seriously, I remember I almost moved into this place. Get this. It was advertised as pet-friendly, but guess what?
Let me guess. Only hamsters allowed?
Close. Fish. Just fish. Like, I don't even have a fish tank, John. I mean, come on.
that's oddly specific. But yeah, things like pet policies can really sneak up on you, right? Always ask.
Exactly. Speaking of questions, let's start with the big one. Drum roll, please.
What's the rent on this place? Or, as I like to say, how deep do I have to dig into my wallet?
Oh, nice. But seriously, folks, this is the first thing you've got to ask before you even start mentally placing your couch in the living room.
For sure. And while you're at it, follow up with, are utilities included? Because trust me, those can add up fast. Electricity, water, internet.
And coffee delivery fees, if you're like me. Priorities, John.
Right, priorities. But knowing the total costs up front can save you a world of pain later. You'd hate to find out you need a second job to keep the lights on.
Exactly. So here's your big takeaway for now. Never ever skip those crucial first questions. Rent, utilities, and yes, maybe even fish policies. All right, so after tackling the rent, utilities, and yes, maybe even sneaky fish policies, let's zoom out for a second. What good is the perfect place if it's in a not-so-perfect neighborhood? Let's talk neighborhoods.
Yeah, the vibe of a neighborhood is a total game changer. You could find the nicest apartment, but if the area feels totally wrong for you,
It's just not going to work. Like, imagine finding the perfect place, but then realizing there's no coffee shop within walking distance. Disaster, right?
oh, been there. Once rented a place like that thinking it'd be fine. Let's just say I learned the hard way how much I value a walkable neighborhood.
Totally. And for those of you wondering, walkable just means you can get to the good stuff. Cafes, grocery stores, parks, without needing a car.
Right? It's all about convenience. And speaking of good stuff, one super important question to ask is, what's the neighborhood like? Is it more lively or quiet and chill?
Ooh, good question. You gotta know if it fits your vibe. Are you all about quiet nights at home, or do you need to be near like a buzzing nightlife scene?
Exactly. And let's not forget safety. Asking, is this area safe at night? Or even just walking around to observe things, like streetlights, local activity that speaks volumes.
And don't stop there. Get detective-y, ask neighbors, what's it like living here? Or maybe, are there parks or grocery stores nearby?
Yeah, people who already live there can give you the real scoop. It's also the perfect time to learn about nearby amenities like gyms or public transit stops. All that shapes your day-to-day life.
Oh, for sure. And by the way, if you're considering moving into a lively area, maybe check out what the noise level is like at night. This one time, I didn't, and let me tell you.
Oh no, what happened?
Let's just say lively turned into full-on party central till 3 a.m. every night. Great for some people, not so much for me.
Yeah, definitely something to figure out beforehand. So, when you're walking through the neighborhood or talking to the landlord, these details matter.
Exactly. The right neighborhood can make or break how much you love your new place. So don't just stop at asking about safety, dig deeper into what makes the area tick. So, you've scoped out the safety, found nearby coffee spots, maybe even a park or two, and that dream apartment and neighborhood are finally checked off your list. Now comes the next step, the paperwork. John, this part can get, well, a little intense, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The lease is like the user manual for your new home. You might not want to read it, but trust me, you need to. It's where all the critical details about your tenancy live.
Wait, like the fine print that no one ever reads?
Exactly like that. But here's the thing. Some of that fine print can really make or break how smooth your rental experience is. For example, the security deposit.
Oh, the infamous security deposit. So let's pretend the landlord hits you with that classic line. There's a 1-month deposit required. What should you ask next?
You say, is it refundable? Always. You need to know if and under what conditions you'll get it back. Typically, if the apartment's in good shape when you leave, it's yours to reclaim.
Unless your pet goldfish decides to, flood the place. Then it's a no-go, right?
Haha, right. Damage or unpaid rent are usually deal breakers for getting it back. So, always check those terms.
Got it. No goldfish disasters. What about maintenance stuff? Like, what happens if, I don't know, your water heater suddenly explodes?
Great point. Always ask, who handles maintenance? Leaks, broken appliances, these can happen. Some leases say the landlord handles it. Others might put minor repairs on you. Know before you sign.
Yeah, because nothing kills new apartment vibes like arguing over who fixes the leaky sink, right?
Exactly. Another thing to watch for in the lease, renewal options. If you think the apartment's a keeper, you'll want to ask about extending your stay.
Right, like, do I need to sign a new lease every year, or can I just, go month to month after that?
Precisely. And if you're not sure yet, don't rush it. Use polite phrases like, I need more time to consider. Totally okay to take a day or two to think it over.
All right, you've got the lease locked down. Now let's talk move-in day. Picture this, you're all packed, arrive at your new place, and surprise, there's a hidden move-in fee. Ugh, been there, John.
Wait, what? A move-in fee?
Yep, happened to me. Apparently, I forgot to pay for a pre-move-in cleaning they did. No one told me up front. Lesson learned. Always ask, are there any move-in fees?
Smart. And speaking of timing, here's a lifesaver question. When can I pick up the keys? You don't want to show up with all your stuff too early. Or worse, too late.
Oh, totally. I'd add, what time can I move in? Some buildings have strict rules, like no moving on weekends. You want to check, trust me.
Absolutely. And if you're hiring movers, confirm in advance that it's allowed. You don't want any surprises on the big day.
All right, so lease, check. Deposit, check. Move-in day, planned out. And just like that, you're well on your way to turning this new apartment into your new home.
Exactly. And remember, knowing the details up front means fewer headaches later. Take the time to ask questions. It's always worth it.
All right, so let's wrap this up, folks. We've covered apartment hunting, signing the lease, and now move-in tips. Hopefully, you're feeling confident and ready to tackle your next big move.
Absolutely. Whether you're gearing up for your first place or your fifth, just remember the key questions we've highlighted today. They're your tools to make this process easier and less stressful.
And because we love you, here's your final takeaway. Always double-check the fine print, plan ahead, and don't be afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right. You deserve the perfect spot.
Couldn't have said it better. Good luck, everyone, and happy apartment hunting.
And that's it for today's episode. Catch you next time on Chatterbox Podcast, your guide to, well, life's trickiest challenges.
Take care, everyone.
The Apartment Hunt, a journey to my new home. It was a Monday morning when I decided it was finally time to look for a new apartment. I had been living in a tiny, overpriced studio for months, and it just wasn't cutting it anymore. I needed more space, a better neighborhood, and ideally a place that felt more like home. I pulled out my phone and started browsing rental listings online. After a few hours, I found a place that looked perfect. Spacious, affordable, and in a neighborhood that seemed like it was exactly what I was looking for. I called the number on the listing, and within minutes I was scheduled for a viewing later that afternoon. When I arrived at the building, I walked into the rental office where I was greeted by the landlord, a friendly woman named Sarah. She smiled and said, "We have a few units available for rent." I was relieved to hear that because sometimes places get snatched up quickly. I followed her to the first apartment, and as we walked through the door, I could already tell this was a strong contender. But before I got too excited, I asked the most important question. What's the rent on this place? Sarah told me, it's $1,200 a month, and utilities are included. I nodded, taking mental notes. Utilities included? That was a big deal. It meant I wouldn't have to worry about extra bills for electricity, water, and gas. I smiled, feeling a little more hopeful about the place. Next, I had to check out the neighborhood. I had a few concerns about safety and convenience, so I casually asked, "What's the neighborhood like? Is it safe?" Sarah gave me a reassuring answer. "Oh, it's a quiet, family-friendly area with lots of parks nearby. There are also a couple of coffee shops and restaurants just a few blocks away. It's perfect for someone who enjoys peace but also likes being close to the action." I loved that answer. It felt like it could be the right balance between tranquility and excitement. As I was walking around the apartment, I asked, "Can I take a look at the lease terms? I want to make sure everything looks good before I move forward." Sarah handed me a copy of the lease, and I skimmed through it, looking for anything that seemed unusual or problematic. After a few minutes, I felt confident. The lease seemed standard, and there wasn't anything that jumped out at me as a red flag. "Okay, I think I'm ready," I said, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. But before I could give Sarah an answer, I hesitated. There was still one more thing to confirm, whether or not the apartment was furnished. I didn't want to have to buy furniture, so I asked, "Is the apartment fully furnished?" She smiled and said, "Yes, it's fully furnished. The couch, bed, dining table, everything you need is already here." That made my decision easier. I wouldn't have to worry about hauling in furniture or spending money on pieces I didn't need. However, before I committed, I had one final concern. "What about a security deposit?" I asked. "Is there one required?" "Good question," Sarah said. "Yes, there's a security deposit of $1,200, which is 1 month's rent. But don't worry, it's fully refundable as long as there's no damage to the apartment when you move out." That was exactly what I expected. Security deposits were standard, and as long as I took care of the apartment, I'd get it back when I left. At that point, I was feeling pretty good about the place. "So, when is the apartment available?" I asked. Sarah responded, "It's available starting the 1st of next month. You can move in any time after that." "Perfect," I said, already envisioning myself living in this new space. "I'll take it." We wrapped up the conversation, and I made sure to confirm everything: rent, utilities, the security deposit, and the move-in date. Everything checked out, and I was excited to sign the lease. The next few days flew by as I made arrangements for movers, packed up my things, and prepared for the big move. On moving day, I was full of anticipation. When I walked into my new apartment for the first time, everything felt right. It was spacious, bright, and exactly what I had imagined. I remember looking around and thinking, "I'm really happy with this apartment. It's perfect for me." I immediately felt at home, knowing that I had made the right decision. And just like that, my apartment hunting journey was over. I had found my new home, and thanks to everything I had learned along the way, asking the right questions, understanding the lease terms, and confirming all the details, I had set myself up for a smooth transition into my new life. In this story, I've used some of the native expressions we discussed in the podcast, like, "What's the rent on this place? What's the neighborhood like? Can I take a look at the lease terms? Is the apartment fully furnished? What about a security deposit? When is the apartment available?" Each of these phrases is key when navigating the apartment rental process, and they helped me find the perfect place for myself. If you're ever in the same position, just remember to ask those important questions, take your time, and make sure everything is in order before you commit.